Joining me on this episode of Linux for Everyone, I am very, very... All right. Joining us on this episode of Linux for Everyone is Ryan Sipes of Thunderbird. And Ryan, what exactly do you do at Thunderbird? I never asked you your official title.
So my title is Community Manager and Business Development Manager. And I have another title because there's a council who runs Thunderbird, the project. Mm-hmm. And on the council, I'm the treasurer. So I've got three different titles rolled up.
Yeah, three very distinct hats. And you've been there for how long?
Almost 3 years.
So you're here basically to tell us about a success story, but I want to back way up and find out your own origin story. Like how did you get into Linux? How did you discover it? How did you fall in love with it?
Sure. Well, some of your audience might actually know me. I've been around for a long, long time. I fell in love with Linux in high school. I was living on a farm in Missouri and had dial-up internet, 28.8 kilobits per second until I graduated. And so to be able to even try Linux, I had to go to school and use their T1 connection to download images. Wow. And then
going from a dial-up at home to a T1 at school, that's insane.
Yeah. But it was a great formative experience, but it was also really hard because, I couldn't just download stuff at home and play with it. I had to be very deliberate about choosing, what distros I wanted to play with and stuff like that.
Right. It wasn't just I'll download every flavor of Ubuntu 2004 and just,
Yeah.
So what did you first choose? Do you remember?
I've been asked this a few times. I know I used the first release of Ubuntu, but I don't think that was the first distro that I used. I think it was Mandrake.
I hear Mandrake a lot. Mandrake or Red Hat or SUSE before it was OpenSUSE, right?
Yeah. The thing I loved most about it, because I was 14, was about any Linux distribution, was installing all the stuff that enabled me to do desktop cube and wobbly windows. I don't know if you've seen that yet.
Oh, believe me, yeah. I know. When I got my wife into Linux, we were on this hunt for okay, this is all great and everything. Yeah, snaps, whatever, awesome, everything works. Okay, but how do we enable the cube? the desktop cube, right? That 3D cube. Yeah, that
was a geeky
cool. Compiz, right?
Yes, Compiz. That's it. I actually got it running. Well, we'll get there in a moment. But I worked at System 76 for a year and some change, and I got it running.
That was completely unintentional, by the way, that I was wearing this.
Yeah. So anyway, I loved Linux. I loved it so much that I actually did a really bad thing, and I don't know what came over me, but I actually installed it on half the computers in the computer lab at school. Just wiped them.
Wiped them, and oh my god. Oh my.
I don't know. Looking back, it wasn't a dumb or a really weird kid. I just for some reason was this is great. No one will notice, and just did it. Man. People did notice, but some people didn't. Some people just rolled up and just started using it.
What a great story.
But fast forward, I became a sysadmin for quite a few years of my early career. And then I put together quite a few lugs. I put together the first Kansas Linux Fest. Obviously not alone. It was with help, but we had a great turnout. It was for just being this let's have a Linux Fest. We had, I don't know, a ton of people, all in all over the whole time. We almost had 1,000 people, I think.
Wow.
And
man.
Yeah. And then
I'm starting to see why you're a community manager now over at,
Yeah. I started a company called Mycroft. There, you can go to Mycroft AI, the open source, Amazon Alexa. It was before the Echo.
Hey, Mycroft, what are beans? Beans serving size 130g, total calories 132, fat calories 4%, daily value **, total fat 433 mg,
1% saturated fat 61 mg,
0% trans fat, cholesterol 0g, 0% sodium 264 mg, 11% total carbohydrates 20.
Mycroft, shut up.
8% dietary fiber 7g.
I've heard enough about beans.
It was very hard though. It's very hard to just do that from almost nothing, But I left there. I left it in my co-founder's hands, and I went to System 76, where I was community manager, and for a year and some change. And then I actually helped with the idea of like Pop OS. I remember the meeting where I was in favor of rolling out we were talking about whether we should stay with Ubuntu,
right,
or we should do like our own thing, or if we should team up with an existing flavor, like Elementary was floated.
There's still, there's still some shades of Elementary in Pop OS, or is it that there's shades of Pop OS and Elementary? The installer, you guys share that. Yeah. The installer and I believe the software store as well had some of the same elements.
So Cassidy, James, and I were there at the same time. Early on, it was mostly like him and I would walk into Carl's office and say, we should like essentially do whatever we can to acquire Elementary OS. Just hire all the people, bring them in.
Yeah.
And they did that just started hosting some of those binaries in their own.
Wow, I mean, what a great time to be at System 76 with the concept of Pop OS forming and probably some very early plans for things like the Thelio.
I saw 3 different versions of Thelio that no one ever saw.
Oh yeah, the prototypes.
Yeah.
Are you sure? I've seen prototypes. Now Emma showed me 2 very early prototypes, but I don't know if those were the original prototypes.
There's I know there was one way I was convinced it was going to look. The first one I saw, there was almost, it's so crazy how much it changed because there was almost no discussion, there was just the first one I was introduced to was this is how it's going to look. And then, and
that thing went through dozens of iterations before the final design. It's still going through iterations. It's still being slightly updated. Yeah, it's great. I'm kind of bummed that I got mine before they introduced the various shades, the color, the red, especially the red and the blue.
Although the 2 that they released originally, the bamboo and the walnut, yes,
yeah,
those are so beautiful though. Those are I understand, but at the same time, if you have one of those, it's an attractive machine. So one thing we kept saying was, that's just awesome. I just love that. And it's real wood and it's real metal, that's awesome. Yeah. You're a super fan. You get the extra swag. One of the last things I'll say about Thelio is that is a product that also had a ton of thought that went into it. I remember Carl would be sitting there he's probably already told you all this, but he would be sitting there. I would go in his office and he would just have different woods and different metals just on his table. And he would be touching them, looking at them for a long periods of time. And, and it's crazy how they're still executing on the vision that was set out then, which was computers, which we wanted to get out this desktop keyboard, and other accessories, and then a laptop, and it's crazy that to just see it continue to go and them to iterate on these things. It's just I
cannot wait to. I hope that at some point we all go to another Superfan event, or they have a press conference, or something, and we see. 3 years down the road, maybe we see all of the System 76 laptop prototypes.
Yes.
What did those look like? How thick were they? What were the materials? But anyway, I know that my listeners are gonna kill me because they're like, you find a way to talk about System 76 in every episode. Anyway,
it's because they're so interesting. They are. But here's a segue. So when I was at System 76, one of our biggest problems, or one of the things we talked about quite often, was somebody buys one of those machines. They are getting set up to be as productive as possible. We didn't want it to feel like when you used Linux, you were behind, because you didn't have Outlook or you didn't have,
or you weren't like sacrificing something, right? You weren't handicapped
exactly.
or right.
But the problem I felt that I had while I was there was that, and I've been using Linux for so long, and it's defined my career. And the problem is that every email app that I used, I just didn't like. I was like, man, these clients are all crappy. And the ones that weren't crappy had other drawbacks. Nihilus, which is now MailSpring. The problem with MailSpring is that take advantage of all the features, they essentially host all of your email on their servers, which just to me kept setting off red flags. I'm like, do I really want to put anything sensitive in here? Because what happens, on the day that there's always just that, hack that you're just like, do I really want Ryan.zip sitting out there with all of my inbox?
Yeah, and it's more than paranoia these days, right? Because these huge corporations have proven that, yes, we are going to get hacked. And yes, your information is going to be exposed or at least be at risk.
I always put the fear of God in people by saying, are you ready for telegram.zip or tinder.zip? That's just sitting there on, I don't think most people, it would just be very...
Messenger.
Yes, yes, exactly.
WhatsApp. Yeah, all of those are just frightening to think about.
I kept just thinking about that, and I saw this role come up on the Thunderbird team for community manager. I just kind of applied on a lark, and then I had some conversation with them, and it wasn't like normal. I was interviewing them at the same time because I was like, as Thunderbird is right now, I think you guys are headed for just kind of the end of the project.
Yeah.
And, a lot of loss of relevance, a lot of, issues just regarding the future. It had been rolled out of Mozilla into just like a project under the Mozilla Foundation. And so at the same time that they were asking me questions, I was asking them, what do you see for the future? How do you see this project maturing to a point where it's really able to thrive and not just survive?
Interestingly, I just searched for, I Googled it, okay, because yes, I usually use DuckDuckGo, but I did this to prove a point. I Googled Mozilla Thunderbird. Google has this section below the initial result that says people also ask. And the top two entries under people also ask, is Mozilla Thunderbird still supported, and is Mozilla Thunderbird dead?
Yes. Yep. I was using Thunderbird at System 76, and I felt like it was just kind of heading towards the end. One of these projects that's just doesn't have a lot of mind share. It's
was it just the mind share, or was it the UI?
Well, the product wasn't changing.
Right. Okay. So it was just kind of stagnating.
Yeah. And when things stagnate, especially the people who care about the people who care about if they're going to be watching the other email clients, what offers me more productivity? If you're using an email client, if you're not just using webmail, you're looking across and you're thinking does Outlook offer me better results? Does whatever. Some people just get it installed on their machine, pre-installed, and they don't ever ask any questions.
I don't know if I'm weird or not. I don't know how to be the target audience for Thunderbird, because I used to use Thunderbird on Windows, and this is way, way back in the day, right? And then Gmail came along, and once Gmail came along, I have been a web-based email guy. And I recently changed to Proton, but they don't have a formal email client, so I just go to protonmail.com, and that's it's one of my pins. I kind of wish that I was an email client guy, because I recognize that there are so many opportunities there to be more productive, but I just I don't know how to make that transition.
Let me tell you why you're not, because I also was at the same time. A lot of days I was just like thinking. So the only reason I was using a client was because, well, there were a few reasons. One reason is you can have all of your accounts in there. So if you have multiple accounts, it's useful if you don't want to just have multiple tabs open for your different email accounts. There are also reasons why you wouldn't use Thunderbird. There's a bit of a learning curve to using it effectively. It's not exactly intuitive first run. The user experience hasn't changed much since a different time for email. But what I always say is Thunderbird can do everything in regards to email. Like, I feel like we literally support every part of the email standard in Thunderbird.
Yeah.
And if you just go diving in settings, you'll just find all this crazy stuff that you won't ever use, but there is someone who relies on that as a part of their workflow or business. And they're just I use Thunderbird because it's the only one that has implemented this standard correctly or whatever.
Okay.
If you give me a fresh Thunderbird install, it still takes me 15 minutes to get everything set up the correct way, which is something that we've been working to change in these last 3 releases I've been a part of. Well, let me go back a little bit. I get to Thunderbird. They said, okay, you're our second or third hire, and we hired you because we knew we needed a community manager. The community could use some more engagement. We could grow and improve as a community. But the project was, I think that year would have pulled in $500,000 over the course of the year. So not bad, considering there was nobody working on that, really as a full-time gig or anything. That was just passive donations.
Passive donations? Half a $1,000,000?
Yeah, that's right.
That seems impressive by I guess most measuring most open source projects. That's probably a gargantuan.
Well, you're talking about probably at the time 25 to 30 million monthly active users. And so if even a small percentage of those people give a little bit, it's still very impressive considering there was not a lot of appeals to the users for donations.
So they were just kind of exploring and researching how do I donate and doing that. Wow.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's amazing.
So while we worked on kind of building the community and creating more opportunities to have people just talk about how to improve Thunderbird more and how to move it forward. At the same time, one thing I really wanted to explore was, which ultimately ended up with this treasure hat on, is I wanted to explore what happens if we actually engage with our users and tell them what we need and how we can grow and how we can improve. Yeah. Because $500,000 a year sounds like a lot, but really it's I don't know, 3 or 4 good engineers. And that's if you spend all your money just on,
right. And you engineers. Still have to worry about salaries and infrastructure and servers and lawyers and so many things. Yeah. So many things.
In those days too, the problem is that the engineering and the technical debt was quite high. Just holding Thunderbird together and making sure that it got built and went out to users was, it seems strange to say it now because we're so far out from there. But at the time it was this is enough work here, just holding it together, that it may not be worthwhile,
Wow. So it sounds like the morale at Thunderbird was really low.
Yeah.
When you joined up, and
it got kicked out of Mozilla Corp, and they said, and even, if you look, you can see Michelle Baker, who's now serving as the CEO over there, saying we don't think that it's sustainable. Like Thunderbird is sustainable. Like we don't think it's gonna. We're gonna give it to the community, and maybe they can be good stewards of it. But like innovation does take resources, and so to read that, you're like, okay, well maybe this is just where Thunderbird is. Like this is what state the product is going to be in, and the best case scenario is that it just maintains this level. We went through that, and then as we actually engaged with the community more, as we shared with them, these are things we'd like to do. This is how you can help us, whether it was contributing with time, contributing to the code or the website there, or whatever outlet that people had the skills for, or if it was donating, we had to make that pitch. It's like, this is what we need, and this is how you can help.
What were some of the high level, like biggest accomplishments that you guys were trying to chase?
One thing I wanted to do was include more of the community in like the conversation. We had like a core group of developers who were longtime volunteers, but not a whole lot of ancillary like conversations. Like at the time, we had somebody who was kind of managing the theme / UX to a UI, not even the UX, the theme / UI to a degree.
Okay.
But he was just a volunteer, but there were so many people who were sharing interesting ideas for Thunderbird, for the UX and the UI. And so one of the first things was just reaching out and being like, let's start having conversations with these people. Like, let's pull them in. Let's make sure that they're sitting in these conversations and sharing their ideas or sharing mock-ups or sharing whatever it is, because that's vital. So, and that's just one example. It was for add-ons too. The add-on developers were over here and we were over here. We've been working really hard on like, how can we have conversations and make sure that it's not two separate groups. It's just, all Thunderbird.
In the short time that I have been in this community, and I say short time because it's been just a little over 2 years, which, is a drop in the bucket. I have noticed that there is never a shortage of brilliant ideas, but there's always a shortage of platforms and ways for those ideas to get heard and implemented. And I think that's where the open source bottleneck is.
Yeah.
And, I can listen, but like, how do I take this idea that somebody has and pass it on to somebody that can actually see that implemented or bridge? It's
the biggest thing I would say to anybody working on an open source project. If you're in a position where you can act as a bridge, you use the correct word. And that's what I would say 80% of my community management work is like hearing something over here and making sure they get connected with the right person to actually collaborate on an idea or on a bug or on a feature. There's a lot of this where somebody's talking over here. They have distinct ideas and they're very good. Yeah. But all open source communities are hard to kind of break into, because most things are like someone's saying that something needs a change. And the main developer's like, well, I'm not going to do that. I've got enough, stuff I already have to do.
Yeah.
And so it's good to have community managers or other people in the community who can kind of almost act as like a representative and say like, you might be overworked or whatever, but if you let these people in and we work together to teach them how to contribute in a meaningful way, then we can, have more minds hacking on this. I know this is nothing special, but most good answers in life aren't anything special. It's like the way to move a open source project forward is to actually engage and be having conversations all of the time.
But that is no easy task.
No, it burns like
all.
It burns like all of my time almost every week.
I can imagine. I am, in a way, the community manager for Linux for Everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a, significantly smaller operation than what you're involved in. And I can't talk to everybody. I can't.
Yeah.
I cannot even absorb everything that's coming at me, much less respond to it and be proactive. And that sucks. It really does. I've got in standard notes, I've got lists a mile long of like just suggestions. Like somebody says something, I just copy paste it, throw it in there, like throw it in there. Hey, check this out. Hey, have you tried this? Hey, I have this question. Maybe this is something you can do. And it's so challenging. Yeah.
One thing yours is a little different, but a lot of the things like you're doing work as communities because you have like everybody who tunes in, who provides feedback. What I've done at actually every role I've served in community facing is mentoring people and then putting them in positions where they own a piece of this. Working on add-ons has been so hard, but I've mentored now like 2 people to where they understand everything, where they know everybody, and then I say, okay, like you guys are add-ons coordinators. That's why communities exist around these projects, because if you don't have those people, like there's no way. And also there can't be just like 1 or 2 guys who know everything, because you never know everything. Someone will ask me like, how do I work on this part of the application? And it's like, I have to intro you to somebody. Like there's no way I can know intimately the code in every part of Thunderbird. Or it's a challenge though, but it's also critical. And when you see open source projects failing, it's usually for reasons around community engagement, or you just see different projects disappear because they are just run by one guy. That person gets burnt out, and even though they may have plenty of users and plenty of really competent even developers using it, no one's ready to step into that guy's shoes or hold up the project. And so
it seems that it is either because that person just didn't prepare for the eventuality that they would get burned out and didn't mentor someone like you were saying, and this is what I struggled with for so long, is they were hesitant to actually accept help.
Yep.
You guys have had a lot of help lately, from what I understand, both financial and what's the word I'm looking for?
Just contributions.
Yeah, there you go. Contributions. Yeah, development help and so I mean, what is the big success story recently with Thunderbird? Because it seems like when you came into this, it was half dead, and it's been slowly crawling out of the grave, and now is thriving. Is that kind of the picture that you're painting here?
So we engaged our users, we engaged our contributors, and the community's probably grown. I don't know. It's hard to say because it's got tendrils everywhere, but it's probably grown at least 100%.
Wow.
We have, our donations have grown 3-4x. We're gonna get $2.1 million in donations this year.
Fantastic.
And that's around reaching out to donors, explaining, like I said, like your money goes to infrastructure, your money goes to improving the product, your money goes to paying down technical debt, and just repeating this and trying to say it in different ways that people can understand. The actual product itself, we had to pay down technical debt. 2 years we paid down technical debt. This release 78 is the release where we actually got to develop new features, new things, and that's just a reality of it. But the great thing is that already looking at our next stable release. So the stable releases are once a year, and we follow Firefox versioning because we share a lot of code, but we don't release every month. So ours doesn't go in a normal 78, 79, 80,
right.
80. So the next release should be, I think, 88. And so 88 will be, just to the user will look like a massive jump, and a lot of just quality of life stuff. But the last 2 releases, we'll talk about that in a second.
Okay,
but the last 2 releases before this one, even though they were massive changes, they didn't look like much of anything because it's just all this plumbing, all these old, implementations of things that had to be rewritten and changed in order to ensure that we could build new things on top of Thunderbird.
Yeah, that's got to be hard as a user to see that and go, well, where's the development happening? This looks the same, it acts the same. So what are they?
It's hard as a community manager.
Yeah,
because it's like, why are we supporting this? Whenever like not much is changing, and you have to be very explicit about this. This is not just a today thing. This is like a 2-year thing, which is very hard, especially for someone like me who likes to talk about the new and shiny.
Does the Thunderbird organization do to attract new users now?
We've seen, at least lately, a lot of people trying Thunderbird again. And it's just going to sound like what I was saying before, but a lot of this is stuff like this. Is just getting out and talking about what we're doing and doing new things. This most recent release, we have OpenPGP email encryption built into the app. So you don't have to install any third-party software. You can just generate a key or bring your own key and start encrypting email in Thunderbird like the moment you download it.
Encryption, privacy, like these are the buzzwords that people are being attracted to lately. This is why Proton Mail is doing so well. What you're saying is you're kind of on a level playing field now with a service like Proton Mail.
Yeah, and it's kind of stems from the ethos of Thunderbird, what this release and the next couple are going to be about, which is bringing all these premium email features to everyone.
Premium for free, right?
Yeah,
premium
in some ways. Like, for instance, you might be using, I don't know, like your telco's email address that they gave you, like when you signed up for your internet service. But we're going to provide you with an experience that is, comparable to what you might have with like Gmail or Proton Mail's webmail experience. And the great thing is that a lot of this is already there in some way, but it needs to be surfaced. Like a lot of the features that would make for a really great, enjoyable, easy to use experience in Thunderbird, they're there. They just need to be surfaced. And we have people like Alessandro Castellani who has developed.
I know that name.
Yes, you've seen
that name.
He has the Akira app on Elementary.
Oh, right.
He has and he's our lead UX architect. Probably also so ready for this next release because a lot of the work he's been doing has been relying on so many other, like prerequisites. And so
the groundwork has been laid now. At some point, was Thunderbird sort of the default bundled mail client for Linux distros?
Yeah, absolutely.
Has that changed? And if so, how significantly has that changed?
I don't think it's changed that much. Our Linux installs are pretty significant for Linux. Normally Linux is not that big on some of these major apps, like numbers. Linux is pretty sizable for us. The other side of that is if you grab most Linux distributions, if it's one of the major ones, be it like Fedora or Ubuntu, usually these things come pre-installed. Maybe not now, maybe it's evolution on Fedora, but I feel like for a while there, every distro that it seemed like I grabbed had Thunderbird just pre-installed. And I think Ubuntu still does.
That's what I had seen too. I've seen Geary on a couple, maybe Evolution, but then there's also, you also have the Windows side, right?
Windows is very large. We have a very, very large Windows install base. I would guess, it's hard because we're also really privacy respecting.
Yeah.
And so we don't grab a lot of like data about what machines Thunderbird is running on necessarily. We may try to be very careful about that and get more insight into that in the future. But at the moment, it looks like we might have 70 to 80% users on Windows, if not more. That's very interesting because a lot of our developers are using Linux. A lot of our developers come to Thunderbird having used it on Linux, and now they're ready to contribute. So that creates this weird thing too, where sometimes there are Windows features that we're slow to implement because we're not living in that world every day.
Is there feature parity between Linux and Windows clients?
Yeah, and one thing that we've focused on lately is and I would only bring this up because I have good things to say about it, is we now have some of our developers assigned to different platform specific improvements.
Okay.
So one thing that a lot of our users, a surprising amount of users, reached out to me about was minimize to tray on Windows. And we rolled that out, and I can't tell you how many people have spoken about that, a feature that I would probably never use in 100 years. But, it's like, to some people that's amazing, but that implementation was very like Windows specific, and you had to understand the platform, and how Thunderbird needs to interact with it and everything. And so we're also looking at the same type of things with each platform to make it feel like it's a native app, which it should.
It's got to be so much trickier on Linux, right? With different window managers and desktop environments, and GNOME. Like GNOME, everybody wants stuff out of the way, and KDE, like, no, I want everything right here in my panel. And
they don't all follow the linuxdesktop.org specs as they should, and so you don't always know what environment you're actually existing in, and so that's very difficult. So yeah, you should definitely talk to Cassidy James over at Elementary about this sometimes. He has very distinct thoughts on this.
Oh, I know he's very opinionated when it comes to anything UX. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is one of the reasons why I have a very hard time not using Elementary OS, especially with 6.0 that's around the corner. Man,
I have to say, it's the best Linux distribution. Just saying.
I don't know. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can put a flag in the ground and say like Pop OS is the best, Elementary is the best, because
I understand you can't abide, but I can.
you are more than welcome to, but yeah, and it's the only thing that stops me with Elementary is battery life.
Really?
That's it. Now there are tools that I've discovered since the last time that I used Elementary OS that might change that argument. We'll see.
I have a Dell XPS 13 over here. I think it's the 2018.
So the 9370?
Yes, that sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. Because that name makes complete sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you this in a moment, but because I told Barton a while back, I was like, why can't you guys just give them human readable names?
Barton was so apologetic when he was talking to me about the 7390 developer edition. I was like, what's it called? What is the model number? 7390? It sounds like it's 2 generations older than the 9370 that I have already.
Yeah, why not?
Why are you guys doing that? But I know it's not them. I know it's Dell proper. It's not.
It's still
it's not the Project Sputnik gang, but
give it a year or give it a cool name. Call it I don't know, Phoenix or something like that, or
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Excalibur, that would be cool. If I could buy the Dell XPS Excalibur, I'd buy it just
take a page from AMD. Okay, take a page from AMD with their CPUs. Oh, Threadripper was the code name, but then it was like, oh, this has to be the real name.
Yeah, exactly.
It has to be the name of the product. It's Threadripper.
Exactly. But no, I was just gonna say my battery life went from when I put Elementary on here and I was worried about battery life. I've always had bad battery life. I don't know why. It's very comparable to Windows. I was dual booting for a little bit, doing documentation for Thunderbird on how to build it on Windows. But as I was doing that, I was really just shocked that I could go to the coffee shop in the morning and then go hang out somewhere else in the afternoon with both OSs and it seemed like the same. It seemed like the battery was always discharged the same. I didn't have to charge it all day. So I'm very pleased.
Perhaps, but I bet if you put Pop OS on that same Dell, that it would be longer battery life than both Elementary and Windows.
Well, if they do, I don't know if they are going to do this with the next Elementary release, but if they do the what is it called? The battery optimization stuff just out of the box, that can make an extraordinary difference. And I say all this, but there's no reason to trust myself and my memory that I didn't at one point do that.
I mean, I think, this is just experiential, right? It's I forget the word, but
yeah.
I don't have hard benchmarks to prove that, Pop! OS is 15% longer battery than Fedora and 25% more than Elementary. And I don't have any hard data to prove that. It's just how it feels. But man, I'm with you. I adore the way that Elementary OS looks and feels.
Yeah.
And if they were to improve the battery life with 6.0, why are there so many good distributions? I wish that more of them would suck so that the choice wouldn't be so hard, right? I was just about to go to Fedora and Elementary, right? Actually, I was about to stick with Elementary OS, and then System 76 comes along and they're like, window auto tiling in 2004. I was like, oh my God, I've got a huge ultra wide, and I can't live without window auto tiling now. Yeah. So it's stuff like that. Just anyway, I know we're way off topic here, but that usually happens on the show.
Though. I tried I won't name the distro if I'm gonna distro shame, but I did try another one here recently. Just they're not focused on the UX is not like their number one focus. It's other things, but then you miss like being able to do like smart tiling of windows, and you miss all of the little things that I understand. Yeah, but there are so many good ones, and you almost can't go wrong if you grab one of the main distros.
No, not at all. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Well, all right, let's bring this back around to you. And I want to ask you a couple questions just off the top of my head. Why should people who are using webmail now, whether that's Gmail or even Outlook.com or Proton Mail, what advantage does a native email client like Thunderbird have over these web-based services? There's probably a lot of people listening that are like me. They have protonmail.com or gmail.com as a pen on their browser, and that's where they go, and that's where they do their email.
When I use Thunderbird, I'll just give the anecdotal answer.
That's the word I was looking for earlier, was anecdotal when it came to battery life. Thank you. Okay, sorry.
First off, it's a native application. It downloads your email, and so the email then exists on your machine, and which means that speed is always like as good as it's going to be. Like, it's not having to load it necessarily unless it has like third-party content that it has to reach out to the internet to grab. Right. Like it's going to load instantaneously. It's just an alt tab away. And unlike all of the browser tabs you already have, I love that it's like self-contained. It's its own thing, and when I click on one of the notifications, which I know there are browser notifications, but like when I click on one of the notifications, it takes me exactly into that email, and I can really quick just use my keyboard shortcuts and reply. And frankly, we've got a ton of add-ons. Can
you talk about some of those because that's something that, is definitely lacking with web-based mail.
The whole thing is, it's like the reason that you use Linux. You can make the same argument for Thunderbird. It's flexible, it is like open, and the experience is exactly what you end up making it. That's like, I have Thunderbird Conversations installed, which kind of gives it an almost a Gmail experience. Like you load it up and you have your threads on the well, for me it's on the left, but you can arrange it however you want. And then I'm looking at it now. So, and then on the right, you have these threads with like the person's picture up in the, I don't know how to describe this.
Almost like a threaded conversation on Facebook or Twitter or something, or like a threaded forum. maybe.
Yeah. You almost like a forum. Yeah.
One thing that I really, I'm not going to use the word hate here, but I very, very, very intensely dislike it, is in Proton Mail. Like sometimes I want to see the whole conversation at a glance. You know, I've got this email thread with like 2 engineers from Lenovo and Matt of Fedora and Mark Pearson at Lenovo and some Red Hat PR people, because we've been going back and forth on the Fedora ThinkPads for like 3 months. And sometimes I just want to be able to just look at the conversation instead of like, oh, click that open, load, click that open, load, click that one open, load.
You should try Conversations. You know, it shows them all in the like where you can just go down the list and see the content.
That is exactly what I want to see.
Yes. We have so many users reach out to us who say like this add-on is like what makes like Thunderbird worth using, but also what makes my email like manageable. And that's the type of thing that is hard to like get across to people, especially if you install Thunderbird, you leave everything default and you use it. It's just not Thunderbird. No one does that. Like no one who ends up sticking with it does that. They all have very specific ways that they've set up filters and set up like just like how everything is sorted. And when you start asking people, they're like, yeah, my email is sorted this way. It's displayed this way. And I'm using X add-on to do whatever.
Okay.
It's a power tool.
Let me play critic for a minute, or devil's advocate. If you have so many people customizing it and not wanting to use it, not wanting necessarily to use vanilla Thunderbird, isn't that a problem for adoption? It
is. And that's why, well, now I get to go back to what started our elementary conversation. That's why we brought Alessandro on, you know, and that's why we're putting so much thought into the UX, because people shouldn't have to dig down to figure out the best way to use Thunderbird. It should be able to be set up in default the best way to use Thunderbird. And then people should have the freedom to change it to, you know, however best suits them, but out of the box, you know, all of the little things. And that's something that has, for many, many reasons, we hadn't been able to focus on until this release and then the upcoming release.
I acknowledge that can be daunting. What is the sane default experience that is going to make hopefully most people happy? I think that's what turned me away from Thunderbird back in the day on Windows, when I was still using Windows, was that I recognized it was powerful and I recognized that it was useful, but it took too much tinkering. It took too much. It's kind of like using XFCE, right? Like you can make XFCE look beautiful, but out of the box, man, it's not that great.
It's on this computer over here. I can see it right now, and I agree with you completely. But and
but it's been a long time, so I'm going to check it out. I'm going to throw it on this ThinkPad, and can I use Proton Mail accounts?
Yeah,
on Thunderbird.
Yeah,
you have to have the bridge, though, the Proton Mail bridge, but you can still, okay.
Yep. On mine, I have my work account and then my Proton Mail account and then just a test account that I use for stuff. So, and then I would also encourage you, so we, in this release, this most recent release, we rolled out things like dark mode and like and just a bunch of small improvements like that are, oh, and you know, one thing is to use Thunderbird, you also have to kind of go all into it, like get your calendar in there, get your tasks in there.
Yeah. Okay. You know, and that's actually one thing I've been thinking about recently. You sent me an invite for this interview, and I had in Proton Mail, I had no means to actually like accept it and add it to a calendar, and that kind of made me upset. I was like, man, if I had opened this in Gmail, I could have added it to my calendar. If I would have opened it in just some other thing. But no, I had to like manually make a calendar entry for it because I was in Proton Mail. So yeah. With
the PGP update, which we did already have that in an add-on. We actually worked with the add-on author to bring that functionality into core. You have a lot of great things too, where you send me an email, it's signed, you know, I can add your stuff and we can just I can add your public key. We could start doing back and forth encrypted email, but I don't have to think about it that much. It's just like, oh yeah, he sent me this, like, okay, I'll click it, add, like now we're having an encrypted conversation. And from then on, like you're both not thinking about the fact that it's encrypted. It's just Thunderbird has just stored those keys and it's just happening. The point I'm trying to make, I guess, is that what we're trying to do right now is make all of these little things just like convenient and something you don't have to think about that much in Thunderbird. You're just like, yeah, it knows what to do. It does the right thing.
It sounds to me like during your time there, it has been mostly a rebuilding phase. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah.
And then with the next release, which is what you said, 88. If you're listening to this or watching this in August 2021, give Thunderbird a try because it sounds like it's going to blow your mind. If like me, you used it, I don't know, 7 years ago, and maybe we're not that impressed. And
or hop on the beta. The release cadence is the same as Firefox, and it's not like the nightly. It's not. It's it's very unlikely it's just going to crash, And so the beta is generally. I mean, I'm using the stable release right now because it's new, but generally I'm writing on the beta, and it's great to see all of these things as they like come to life every month. And especially Linux users are people who are technically inclined. Like
we like the bleeding edge, unless we don't. Like I don't like the bleeding edge on my production machine. No. Well, I want a stable distro, but I want bleeding edge software, which makes me kind of a walking contradiction, I guess. But whatever. Yeah, like I won't do a rolling release, but I want the latest versions of Audacity and OBS and Shotcut or whatever. Well, any closing thoughts?
I would encourage people, obviously, to try out Thunderbird. The other thing I would say is if you are on Twitter @MozThunderbird, or follow me @Ryan Lee Sipes if you want to hear about my musings.
Yep.
And then
I'll have links to pretty much all that stuff, like where you can get Thunderbird, where you can follow, where you can contribute, where you can donate, all that in the show notes.
And the last thing is when you support projects like Thunderbird or Firefox, just even by using them, it matters. You're voting with your time. You're voting with maybe your money if you contribute to them. And that's important because when you don't, those things are in danger of going away. And then
I am in a very tricky situation that relates to exactly what you just said, because I recently not switched, but I decided to try the Brave browser because I have been using Firefox for years. Like that's all I've ever used, and I like it. Thank you very much. I'm comfortable with it. But I thought, as someone who's covering Linux, and I should see how the other half lives. See what this is all about. I'm really torn right now because I understand that Firefox has a diminishing market share, and Google is just kind of owning the web, and that's dangerous. And I acknowledge that. But at the same time, my struggle is, well, Brave is actually much faster and smoother than Firefox is. What do I do about that?
Yeah.
Maybe we got to make Firefox better then, right?
Yeah. When the web is optimized for like Blink, because that's what most users are on, when it's optimized for Chrome, essentially, it's very hard to compete with that because, your developers who are making these web apps or websites, they're doing a lot of their testing in Chrome. And that's unfortunately the challenge when you're up against like a monopoly. And Brave is smart because they're leveraging that. But at the same time, it's also scary because it's like, what if by default, Google ends up owning essentially like what the web looks like because they maintain the project that is the
we're not that far from that being the case,
Yeah. And we already saw Google abuse there. I'm not speaking as a Mozilla spokesman. Like they don't pay me to do that. They don't necessarily endorse what I'm saying, but we've already seen how they will abuse their place by saying like, this isn't compatible. Like you can't run, whatever it is, Like I remember for a while, happened all the time, but I would load up a web app, a Google web app in Firefox, and it would say like, this doesn't run, your browser's not supported. But if you go and you change the user agent, it runs just fine. The worst thing is Google gaining this power when they've shown that they already aren't good stewards of it by not allowing people on other browsers to essentially use, their services unless those are really like anti-competitive things to do. And it's just not cool. And so like Brave is actually a good mission, like trying to be good for the internet, trying to be good for its users. It is too bad that every person using Brave is just another tool for Google to continue its supremacy.
Yeah, and see, it's not like I didn't think about that. I intentionally said, well, I'm not using Chrome. But oh wait, actually I am using Chrome.
I did use Brave for a while when it first came out. It's like fast, especially when you're blocking trackers and other things, like you're going to have even more speed ginned out of that thing. I really, really hope that as Firefox continues to iterate and focus on the things that they can uniquely do around privacy and stuff, that it's competitive. And so I'm not paid by the Mozilla Corporation, the folks who make Firefox. So this is actually like truly how I feel. But I've started using like Lockwise and playing around with their VPN and, using some of these other things around, the Firefox.
Yeah, their whole
browser.
ecosystem, like Firefox Send is wonderful.
Yep, and Pocket, I save a lot of articles in Pocket, and sometimes I even discover from like friends, interesting stuff in Pocket. And it is quite nice. I'm hoping that as they kind of narrow their focus to like improving all of their offerings, that people will find more value outside of just the browser. But they still have to compete on the browser front, and hopefully in the end, the good thing for the internet survives and wins out.
I don't know what the date was. Let's say, I think it was Sunday, August 30th. There was a huge internet outage, from what I can tell, around the world.
Yes.
And it was all, my understanding was it was all down to CenturyLink going down, which disrupted Cloudflare, which like completely screwed so many people over here in Croatia, or in Asia, in the US. I mean, that was really frightening to see that one little spoke in a sea of spokes went down and the whole bicycle fell off the sidewalk.
This is like my kick lately. Decentralized, standardized web. In this case, Cloudflare is a very large dependency of a lot of organizations, which I can't blame them. They're very good at what they do. At the same time, it's also very different than the internet that existed at one point, and then I imagined would continue to exist and even be even more, decentralized and crazy than it was whenever I got into tech. I was like, in the future, like, maybe like my phone will be like the web server for my whatever. And like, I mean, you could technically do that.
It's a nice dream, right? Yes.
But it's like, instead we're like more and more and more centralized. And that's crazy. That's not really the way things are supposed to be. But maybe that'll change.
Maybe at some point, it will get so terrible that there will be some kind of,
we have the technology, but
we can rebuild it.
Yeah, but we honestly do. And there's like so many cool things like ActivityPub, which is behind Mastodon. I mean, RSS never died. and
I need to get back into. Does Mozilla have an add-on for RSS still? I mean, sorry.
You don't need it.
Does Thunderbird have an add-on for RSS?
It's built in.
It's just built in.
And we're looking at building in ActivityPub, so you'd be able to track like what people were posting on. Well, ActivityPub doesn't have to just be, like Mastodon. There are actually other, I guess, applications that are also using ActivityPub for posting, updates. The other thing we're building right now is a matrix implementation into the chat.
Man.
So the idea is that at least when it comes to communication, that, you know, Thunderbird could be a place you go to do your decentralized, standardized communication. But
there was some comment on Twitter about how, man, isn't it nice that, you know, you only need to install one email client and there's, you know, a million different chat apps, right?
yes.
Imagine if all of those were in your email client. That would be so wonderful.
Yeah, I've gone on and on, but we do actually have like a lot of technologies that would allow us to move away from these centralized things. The problem is, like, how do you bring your whole family over to, you know, how do you get those people who aren't technical over to these things? And it just means that the services and the applications have to get better
and
around
easier
those decentralized.
and easier to use.
Yes,
also.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's a chicken and egg deal, because I mean, now Thunderbird's getting better because people threw in on us, but not everybody starts out where we kind of rebooted at, which is 30 million users. You know, it's like
right.
Most startups or platforms don't have that advantage to build on top of. And so we're going to do what we can, but hopefully other people will be able to get their stuff out there too.
I wish you guys luck. It looks like you're on a very good path to kind of that resurgence and that, you know, blowing people's minds again, like Thunderbird used to. So that's cool. Anyway, Ryan, thank you. Thank you for hanging out for like 90 minutes and chatting about this stuff. And thanks for going off on a few tangents with me. That's always fun. I think we'll have to circle back on this in about a year or so. And in the meantime, I'm going to try out Thunderbird. I'm going to try and migrate over.
Let me hook you up with some preferences I have, and then maybe you can share those with your users.
I'm liking how this sounds, because if you have a certain, like, if somebody at Thunderbird has a certain setup that they like, there's probably a good reason for that, right?
Yeah. And then maybe even your followers, your audience can try that same thing and share some of their feedback with us in a way that we can, you know, hear from people who are interested in this. Like, what are you liking? What are you not liking?
A big thank you to Ryan for joining us on this episode of Linux for Everyone. And if you guys want to get involved with Thunderbird, if you want to, you know, get in touch with Ryan or contribute or donate or anything, all the links you need will be either in the show notes for this episode or in the description on YouTube and Library. So until we chat again, may your email adventures be awesome, and take care of each other. Had a lot of fun. Thanks.
Yeah, me too.
Bye.